at least if you read the headlines, the U.S. and Canada are having a spat right now.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
what's the temperature in Canada? Like, what do you guys think of us
Yeah.
Americans right now?
Yeah, and I think, you defined it pretty well. There's a pretty big separation, I think, between the individual person and maybe say the administration, level. And I think a lot of both Americans and Canadians feel, pretty far away from the choices that are being made right now. I think, probably a lot of Americans, even say Republicans or people who are on the right wing who voted Trump in, didn't necessarily he was going to go after Canada and Mexico, first on his priority list and so aggressively. And I think, Canadians on the same hand do not like the response of our prime minister or former prime, I don't even know where the hell we are right now, with like, immediate responses to reciprocal tariffs because, this ratcheting up of temperature, I think has been not ideal for at least my perspective. Most Americans aren't that happy. I know there has been some anger there's been some, I see it on the comments and stuff. Americans going at Canada, hey, we're going to crush you guys. And then Canadians going back. But I think generally, we talk about this idea of Canadians and Americans being alike in a lot of ways. And I don't think this is necessarily what we wanted. So part of the population, pretty hot, pretty angry, maybe a little disappointed, and probably scared from what I'm seeing. But other ones, I think, just wanted to see like Americans and Canadians sort of better. It's like seeing your parents fight.
Yeah, for sure. But like Canadians are so nice. You guys are so
Yeah.
nice. If instead of like actually cussing us out and dropping f-bombs, you guys are just like, you guys are big meanie heads. I mean, I feel like you guys are
Yeah.
so nice that you would never actually I don't know, make a big deal about it. But I think where things are going, like things are not getting better at this moment.
No.
I feel like things are ratcheting up. We are in the middle of March 2025 right
Yep.
now, and supposedly at the beginning of April we're going to have these tariffs actually enacted from the US side. Who knows if that's going to be kicked down the road to another month and there's going to be more negotiation. But to be clear, like things are not getting better. We're not getting to an area that is more agreeable. But I think a lot of that has to do in Canada. This is an outsider's watching with the changes in your own government and kind of this identity, I don't want to say identity crisis, but maybe where Canadians are questioning like, what does our country actually want? What are our leaders going to actually do? And I picked one quote off of one of your videos recently because you talked about Mark Carney and how it's so ironic that, it's the Liberal Progressive Party in Canada and they pick a white male banker who's the exact antithesis of, like what this party's supposed to want. And I'm curious, like, what's Carney's reputation and like, where do people think he's going to go direction-wise in the short term?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. And I do think I mentioned this in another video where it's like, it is interesting to see Canada's politics elevated on a little bit more global stage and be a bit more interesting, even to Americans. I think we're in that very crucial moment where you see the trajectory of a country. And there's a big chart that's floating all around X today where it shows the growth of countries over the last 10 years, their GDP, and Canada's at the very
Canada shrank. We've talked about that before, especially GDP per capita.
Exactly.
Well, you guys had such massive immigration.
Crazy. And I mean, I've seen that firsthand effects. I don't need to get too much, into that, but there's been a lot of anger over that. And I think we're on that split. Basically what the US had just at the end of last year, right? Are you going to go Kamala or are you going to go Trump? And those are very different trajectories of the country and path that you're going on. And so what's happened here recently, Mark Carney is basically our prime minister and, basically installed by a very small percentage of Canadians who voted, specifically Liberals, about 0.3% of the entire population of Canada, 150,000 people, put him as prime minister of the country. That's like if Biden had dropped out, partway through and Kamala had just gone in by default. How would Americans feel about Kamala? That is not a represented person in power. That's how a lot of people feel about Carney right now.
Can't Pierre Poilievre, can't say his last
Pierre,
name.
I can't say it either. I'm sorry. I know.
Okay.
I know
well,
I should be able to.
Better. It makes me feel a lot better if a Canadian can't even say the actual French name of, can he, the way your politics work is obviously different than the US. And I know a little bit about it, but from a US general perspective, it's very confusing because it's a different process to get the PM elected or rise to power. So can Pierre come back eventually, or what's his
Yeah.
status?
So what happened here is there was basically a coalition government between the Liberal Party, which is Justin Trudeau, which is sort of the left wing. It used to be the centrist party. I would say the left wing centrist party in Canada has now become the very progressive left wing party. There's one more party that's even more progressive than that, which is called the NDP. So I don't know if you've seen this guy, Jagmeet Singh.
I have.
Yeah. So
We don't want him.
no one wants him.
No.
He is highly unpopular. They have a coalition government together. And basically what happened was, Pierre could try to bring up what's called like a no confidence vote, where if that went through, he could force an election to happen. But because Jagmeet and Trudeau kept that coalition together, he could never force that vote. That could never actually happen. What happened in the last several months is Trudeau finally, I think after Trump made him cry on a phone call, decided he should step down and go through this process of finding a new leader. But what happened was he used this method called proroguing parliament, which means our parliament is not existing right now and it's not back until March 24th. On March 24th, which is not that far away, we could start to try to have no confidence votes again. But all of this rests on, will Jagmeet Singh continue supporting the Liberals or actually vote with Pierre? But why would Jagmeet Singh, go with Pierre?
It's the complete opposite of what he believes in, basically.
Exactly. And it takes him out of power. And Liberals have lots of ways to woo Jagmeet. And famously, Jagmeet wanted to keep this. And this was the dirty, nasty part of it, was that he wanted to keep this running because I think it was in February. If he hit February, say 15th, he secured his pension as a Canadian sort of leader there. So they were calling him Pension Singh and all these things. So it's a nasty little situation we're in. To answer your question, Pierre can come back and an election will happen before November of this year. But most Canadians feel right now is Carney should call an election. He's basically an unelected prime minister of our country right now. And his reputation is not good. His reputation in a few words from most people would be WEF puppet, globalist, banker, overly progressive woke, and has a huge history of forcing carbon tax policies on Canadians while he operates companies that are, selling oil, doing pipelines, all these things that conflict, hugely with these sort of agendas that he's pushing on the Canadian population. It's crazy.